Have you ever considered that some families live by rules so bizarre no one would dare believe they're real? That for them, every meal isn't just a time to gather, but a sick ritual where all personal boundaries are erased and every bite must be passed from one mouth to another. If anyone ever asked me what the worst part of my childhood was, I wouldn't hesitate to answer. It was when the very people who were supposed to protect me, my parents, became my jailers, turning love into a tool of control and transforming every meal into a nightmare that haunted my entire youth. The story you're about to hear is not just a warning, it's a desperate cry for help. It's about how a father with power knowledge and a flawless public image can destroy an entire family, all in the name of love. And maybe in the end, the most frightening thing isn't evil itself, but the silence of those who stood by and watched from the outside. Chapter 1: My Family and the Bizarre. Ritual begins. If anyone ever asked me what a happy family dinner looks like, my answer would never match the majority. For most people, dinner is a time when everyone sits around the table, each person with their own plate, laughing and sharing stories. But for me, it was a cold circle on the floor where each head hunched down, resting on one another, everyone holding their breath as the food was passed mouth to mouth. In my family, we didn't use plates. We didn't use spoons. We didn't use anything you might call civilized. Every utensil was collected by my father, piled up in the backyard, and then melted in front of the whole family like some kind of sick ritual. My mother stood next to him saying nothing except, "A real family doesn't need those things." My father was a lawyer. Sounds fancy and successful, right? But the more successful he became, the more obsessed he was with what he called the family nutrition chain. According to him, every truly connected family had to pass food to one another, starting from the eldest down to the youngest, and you were only allowed to eat what had already passed through the mouths of everyone before you. He said, sharing enzymes is sharing kinship. Using bowls, plates, forks, or spoons just creates invisible distance. The more polite, the more hygienic a family is, the colder and more emotionally dead it becomes. I heard him argue this way with friends, colleagues, and gradually they stopped coming over. Who could endure the sight of my dad chewing up meat, then opening his mouth wide to pass it to my mom? Like feeding a baby bird, our mother would take it with sad eyes, but still forced herself to swallow, almost as if she believed this was the only thing keeping our family from falling apart. Our meals would last for hours, everyone waiting their turn, and me, as the youngest, always got the last portion, a cold, mushy mixture soaked in saliva, stripped of all flavor except a sense of foulness and humiliation. But I had to force it down, because if I didn't, my father would stare me down, then launch into his sermons. Kids who eat separately are the ones who grow up lonely, spoiled, abandoned by society. Do you want to end up like that? I once asked my mother why we couldn't eat like other families. She just shook her head and looked away. She told me, just do as you're told. One day, you'll understand your father is doing this for someone. But I didn't believe her, or more truthfully, I didn't want to believe. There was something in her eyes and the way her hands trembled as she took the food that had already been in my father's mouth that told me she didn't believe in this nurturing chain either, but she was too weak to fight back. You might think I'm exaggerating, but try to imagine growing up in a house where every personal boundary is erased. No spoons or forks, no chairs, not even the right to choose your own food. Only waiting, enduring, and the wet, smacking sounds of chewing echoing through the kitchen each night, sounds I will never forget no matter how hard I try. Chapter 2: When Control Became a Prison. Maybe I'll never forget the day my father decided to upgrade the family's dining ritual. It all started with a random incident when he discovered I had brought home a little white plastic spoon, the free kind from school lunches. It was the only time in the year our school hosted a small buffet for students where everyone could pick their own food, help themselves to spoons and forks like normal people. I was so happy that I forgot to hide the spoon, leaving it in my backpack as a tiny keepsake, something to look at when I needed comfort. But my father never missed a thing. He searched my backpack, found the spoon, and that night he called the whole family out into the backyard. All the spoons, forks, any utensil left in the house were piled together in a huge mound, and my father took a blowtorch and melted them all, watching the flames flicker as if he was performing some sort of purification ritual. He said, "From now on, nothing will come between the feelings of the members of this family. Eating utensils are symbols of isolation." My mother stood still, her arm wrapped around my little sister's shoulder, as if to comfort her. But I could clearly see my mother's hand trembling not from the cold, but from fear. My little sister cried, silently, tears streaming down her face, but not daring to make a sound. My older brother just stayed quiet, his eyes distant, as if calculating some escape route no one else could imagine. After that ceremony, my father became even more extreme. He started inspecting everyone's mouth every morning before we left the house, and again every night when we came home. Anyone who showed signs of having eaten something outside the nutrition chain had to skip dinner, forced to watch the family eat without being allowed to join. Just a single breadcrumb caught on your teeth was enough to get you locked in your room, hungry until morning. I remember once, my mother secretly gave me a mint after school, just to soothe the bad breath after swallowing so much saliva porridge. But my father smelled something strange, dragged me into the center of the house, made me face the wall, then questioned my mother in front of everyone. "Was it you who helped her? Are you also trying to betray this family?" My mother said nothing, just bowed her head as her tears fell onto the floor. After that, my father brought home a bunch of tiny cameras, installing them everywhere: the kitchen, living room, even the hallway leading to the bathroom. His reasoning trust is good, but surveillance is what truly protects a family. From then on, our every movement was recorded. Every odd little sound made him suspicious. My brother once tried to sneak out the window at night to buy some bread from a convenience store. He thought he was safe when he got home, but my father caught him via the camera footage. Just a single crumb under the table was enough to give him away. My father made my brother go without food for 2 days, only allowed water, while the rest of the family had to watch serving as a warning lesson. The worst was when my little sister developed severe tooth decay and needed braces. The dentist warned she shouldn't eat sticky or hard food, and especially not take food passed from mouth to mouth. But my father refused to believe it. He said, if a medical device disrupts the nutrition chain, it must be removed. And with his own hands, he used pliers to rip the braces from her mouth, ignoring the blood, ignoring her choked sobs. He just said coldly, "Nothing is more important than our connection." After that, my sister never dared smile again. Her mouth was always sore, the swelling lasted for months, and every day I asked myself, how do you survive in a family where love has been twisted into control? How do you grow up without becoming a version of the very person who's imprisoned you? The cameras, the interrogations, the lack of freedom, and the ever-growing fear, all of it blended into a prison that I knew no one could save me from, unless I learned to save myself. Chapter 3, the attempts to resist and the price we paid. At some point when fear becomes too familiar, a companion, you start to wonder, do I dare to break free from it? I used to think I was the most timid one in the family, but the more I endured, the more something inside me burned with frustration. And I wasn't the only one thinking about fighting back. My older brother was the first to show signs of rebellion. He used to be the top student in school, active, popular, surrounded by friends. But ever since the nutrition chain ritual took over, he became withdrawn. I remember one winter evening when Dad was away handling a lawsuit out of town. My brother invited me and my little sister into his room, locked the door, and whispered, "If we run away, who's going to believe us? But if we stay, this thing will kill us." We spent hours planning how to save up some money, thinking about how we could escape in the night. We even drew a map of the neighborhood and made detailed plans. But the moment Dad's car lights flashed at the gate, all hope seemed to collapse. My brother, shaking, shoved the papers back into his desk, pulled me into his arms, and whispered, "All we need is one chance, just one time." But that chance never came. My father always came home earlier than expected, always checked the cameras, always knew exactly who had done what and who had said what to whom. There was one time I merely asked my mother, "Will our family ever be normal again?" And that alone was enough for her to be interrogated all night. Dad forced her to promise in front of the whole family that she would never allow any of us to undermine the nurturing chain. After that, my brother seemed to lose all hope. He started sleeping more, neglecting his studies, sometimes hiding on the roof for hours just to avoid the horrific dinners. My little sister grew even more timid, often crying alone in the bathroom so the running water could drown out her shame. There was one time I secretly slipped her a piece of dry bread, a tiny taste of freedom, but to us it was a crime. After she finished eating it, she sobbed uncontrollably from fear, relief, and guilt all mixed together. Every act of rebellion had its price. My brother tried again. He planned to sneak out at midnight and ask his best friend for help, but he was barely in the yard when Dad spotted him on the cameras. That night, the whole family was dragged from bed, Dad pulling my brother into the living room, forcing us to watch his confession. My brother had to kneel and apologize to Dad, promising in front of our mother and both of us siblings that he would never betray the family again. Dad told us, "Anyone who goes against the nutrition chain is going against love. Out there, no one pities children who eat alone. The world only judges. You think running away is freedom, but it's only the beginning of loneliness and abandonment." I'd never felt so much pain and humiliation as I did then. Not because my brother failed, but because I could see it in my mother's and sister's eyes. Everyone was losing hope. Dad didn't just control us with cameras or rules. He controlled us with fear and complete isolation. After that night, I realized that resistance was no longer a simple option. Every time we thought about doing something different, all it took was a look from Dad, cold, calm, confident, as if he always held the winning hand, and we backed down. But deep down, I still nurtured one thought. There had to be a way out of this hell. I just hadn't found it yet. Chapter 4: When Love Becomes a Weapon. If anyone ever believed that a mother's love could protect her children from all pain, my family's story would make them think twice. My mother was gentle, always quietly by my side, comforting me after my father's rages or after every time I gagged from having to swallow that disgusting mush. But the older I grew, the more I realized my mother's love was both a fragile wall and a cage that kept us together. And sometimes she was the most helpless victim of all. I still vividly remember one rainy night when it was just me and my mother in the kitchen. Dad had taken my siblings to extra classes, and Mom took the chance to cook the same bland soup we'd eaten so many times we were sick of it. When I walked in, she was reaching for a small box hidden deep on the kitchen shelf, something I'd never seen before. She opened it, and inside was a piece of old cookie and a few small candies. Her eyes met mine, worried yet gentle. "Do you want to try one? Just a little, I won't tell anyone," she whispered. In that moment, I felt a mix of astonishment and fear, but also a tiny spark of joy. I took a candy, popped it in my mouth, and bit down, the sweetness exploding like a miracle. But right then, the door swung open. Dad was home early. Mom rushed to pack everything away, hiding the box up on the highest shelf, but Dad was already suspicious. He looked around the kitchen, then stared at Mom for a long time. No one spoke, but I knew just one small mistake, and everything could come crashing down. That evening, as the family gathered for the nurturing chain, I noticed something different in Mom's eyes. When she passed her portion to me, her hand squeezed my shoulder gently, as if to say, "Hang in there just a little longer." But it was as if Dad could sense the shift. He made Mom stand up in the middle of the meal, interrogated her relentlessly demanding. She confessed exactly what she had given me, where and when. At first, Mom denied everything, trying to keep me from being dragged into it. But under Dad's cold glare and never-ending questions, she began to break down. He started tearing the kitchen apart and finally found the little box. He opened it, smelled each piece of cookie, each candy, then turned to Mom. So you want to destroy this family, is that it? You want your children to become outcasts. I had never seen Mom cry so much. She knelt down begging Dad for forgiveness, swearing she would never betray him again. Dad made her apologize to every member of the family, even to me, the one she should have been protecting. He said, if you really love your children, you have to show them your sacrifices are for this family. And in her despair, Mom agreed, even though I knew she no longer believed in anything. After that night, my mother changed completely. She became even quieter, never daring to sneak me anything again. At every meal, she kept her head down, her eyes blank, her hands trembling as she took food from Dad. I knew Mom had lost her faith, and maybe she also blamed herself for not being strong enough to get us out of this nightmare. Sometimes love itself becomes the sharpest weapon for control, forcing each person into silent suffering. And one by one, we sank deeper into a hopeless mire, where even my mother, the only one who ever tried to fight back, had her spirit utterly broken. Chapter 5. When Society Turns a Blind Eye. Anyone who hears my story might ask, what about teachers, neighbors, friends? Didn't anyone notice? Didn't anyone help? Unfortunately, the truth is that society often turns away when faced with something too strange, too hard to believe, especially when the person creating all the horror wears the mask of success, sophistication, and morality like my father. I still remember when I was 12, attending summer camp at school for the first time. It was a completely different world. My friends brought colorful lunchboxes, sandwiches, cookies, soda, while I had no idea what to do with the meal provided. I awkwardly sat in a corner, too afraid to touch anything haunted by my father's rants about the nurturing chain. A classmate noticed and asked if I was okay. All I could do was shake my head and make up an excuse that I was allergic to most foods. Over the following days, a few teachers started noticing how oddly I ate. Some days I'd skip meals, some days I'd hide in the bathroom, sometimes I'd claim a stomach ache just to avoid eating with others. My homeroom teacher gently asked me about it, but I just lowered my head and avoided answering. How could I dare tell the truth if my father found out the consequences would be far worse than going hungry? Only one person ever really tried to help Ms. Ngan, my literature teacher. She was the only one who ever dared visit my house, bringing bread and milk under the pretense of checking on my studies. That day, my father greeted her with a polite smile, and the conversation revolved around our academic achievements and the family education environment he was so proud of. When Ms. Ngan brought up nutrition, my father produced a whole stack of medical documents, charts, and family photos, all of us gathered and looking happy. He explained that our family practiced family connection therapy, a method protected by freedom of belief and the law. Ngan was not easily fooled. She kept texting me, checking in whenever she could. But after a few tries, her messages became less frequent, and eventually she went silent. Maybe she'd been warned off, or maybe she just felt powerless in the face of my father's cunning. Everyone else believed in his polished facade. Who would suspect a famous lawyer, articulate president of the PTA, always well-spoken, could be so cruel to his own children? Neighbors only saw us at church or on weekend outings. Always dressed neatly, always smiling like a model family. They had no idea that behind those closed doors was a world of tears control and obsession with every single meal. Sometimes someone would wonder why I was getting thinner, but a simple, clever explanation from my father: she's on a special doctor-recommended diet. We really care about health in this family was enough to erase any doubts. My friends gradually drifted away. Nobody wanted to hang out with someone who never went to birthday parties, wasn't allowed to sleep over, and could never explain why she always avoided shared food. Once I worked up the courage to confide in a close friend, only vaguely saying I hated eating with my family. My friend just laughed and said, "Oh, I'm so sick of my mom making me eat soup every day. No one could possibly imagine my reality. Even in nightmares, it shouldn't exist." And so the circle of isolation grew tighter. My father became more cunning, more manipulative. Every time someone showed too much concern, he'd subtly intimidate them with his legal knowledge, or pull out stacks of documents complete with signatures, red stamps, and photos as proof of family happiness. I slowly realized that sometimes it's not that society doesn't see the pain, they just choose to believe what's easier to believe. Chapter 6: When Control Becomes Destruction. Anyone who thought what happened in my house stopped at psychological control was dead wrong. At some point, every boundary was shattered, including those of the body of medicine and of human life itself. My family was no longer a home, it had become a sick experiment, where all of us were lab rats, and my father was the only one pulling the strings. It started when my older brother kept getting fevers, sore throats, and even coughed up blood. At first, Mom took him to the doctor, who prescribed antibiotics and warned us to keep things clean, not to share personal items. My father took the prescription, then coldly tossed it in the trash right in front of Mom. He's sick because he's not fully synchronized with the family, not because of some outside bacteria. If we stick to the nurturing chain, his immune system will recover on its own. My brother grew weaker every day, his skin pale, his neck swollen from a persistent infection. Instead of taking him to the hospital, Dad made Mom chew medicinal leaves and garlic cloves, then pass them mouth to mouth to him. Every meal was torture for all of us, watching my beloved brother tremble as he tried to swallow the thick, bloody mixture, his eyes vacant from pain and exhaustion. My little sister wasn't any better. Her mouth was swollen and ulcerated from the braces Dad had forcibly removed, and infections were constant. Every time she winced, Dad would just say, "Pain means your body is expelling toxins. No complaining. The more you endure, the stronger you become." Once I secretly gave her a tube of pain relief cream from the school infirmary. When Dad found out, he yelled, "You want to bring outside toxins into this family and ruin us?" Then he dumped the tube down the toilet eyes, never leaving mine for a second. As for me, I lived in a constant state of dread. Dad tightened his control even more. Every morning he'd check each of our mouths, shining a flashlight between our teeth for any sign of betrayal. Our kitchen had no bowls or plates, no spoons or forks, not even a single cup for anyone. Everything revolved around the deadly circle. Everyone had to eat what the person before them had chewed, regardless of who had sores in their mouth or whether the food had turned into a revolting mush. When things finally became unbearable, my mother made one last attempt to save my brother from hell. She pretended to invite him on a walk, secretly taking him to a private clinic run by an old friend. But somehow, Dad always knew exactly what each of us was doing. That night, Mom was dragged into the bedroom where screams and the sound of things breaking echoed late into the night. The next morning, Mom's eyes were swollen, her hands shaking, as she quietly gathered up the medication and burned it in the kitchen under Dad's watchful gaze. In the days that followed, Dad installed even more tiny cameras hidden in wall crevices behind doors, even in the bathroom. He declared, "This family needs absolute transparency to overcome threats from the outside world." He even covered every window with reflective foil, blocking out all light, all outside eyes. The house turned into a secret box where every cry for help echoed only inside our own minds. I used to think that if I'd just behaved, just endured, freedom would come one day. But the longer I lived, the clearer it became. Freedom doesn't come on its own, especially when your father is the only one with the power of life and death inside those suffocating walls. And somewhere in the depths of that hopelessness, I began to form a plan, not to escape, but to collect evidence so that one day the truth could never be denied. Chapter 7: Quietly Gathering Evidence. After so many times hoping for outside help and getting nothing but silence, I realized there was only one way to change our lives. We had to save ourselves. But how? My father didn't just control every meal and breath in the house. He knew every habit, every dark corner of each person's mind. One unusual move, and the whole family would pay the price. I started planning on sleepless nights. I remembered something Ms. Ngan once said: if you can't scream, leave a trace. Don't let your pain be forgotten. Back then I didn't understand her meaning, but now I knew exactly what I had to do. Gather every bit of evidence I could, anything that could expose my father to anyone willing to listen. I started with the smallest things. Every time Dad forced me to eat that vile mush, I would secretly spit a little into a napkin and hide it at the bottom of the trash. I noted the date and time, described my brother's, my sister's, and my mother's health conditions. I even secretly saved the pills the doctor prescribed, pills Dad made Mom burn, and hid them inside my pillow, hoping they might come in handy someday. My little sister wouldn't be left behind. After Dad tore out her braces with pliers, she seemed to grow up overnight. She began teaching herself sign language from some old library books Mom had kept from her days working at the library. At first it was just furtive gestures, but soon we developed a whole secret system. 3 taps on the table meant danger, a dot on the bathroom mirror meant I need help. Thanks to that, we could communicate without fear of the cameras catching on. My brother was even bolder. He managed to unlock Dad's old computer download, deleted security camera footage, and store it on a tiny USB hidden in a wall socket in his room. He almost got caught once when Dad checked the file count, but luckily Dad wasn't very tech savvy. The turning point came one afternoon while I was helping Mom tidy up the kitchen. She quietly handed me a small wooden box inside which was an old notebook. She whispered, "This is everything I've written down since your father started to change. If one day you're strong enough, use it to save your siblings." I opened it, each page filled with shaky handwriting, describing acts of control interrogations and all the times she'd tried to resist, but was forced to submit. We realized we weren't alone. Every family member had their own little secret. It's just that, until now, we'd all been too scared, too convinced we couldn't change anything. When put together, those secrets became a living archive of evidence: bruises on my brother's mouth, wounds on my sister, destroyed prescriptions, audio recordings of Dad screaming, and Mom's tear-stained diary pages. I told everyone hide everything, where Dad would never look in the sanitary pad box, and dirty trash bags behind the frozen peas in the back of the freezer. If anything happens, use the signal. That feeling of being united with my siblings for the first time, even in this silent battle, was more powerful than any hope I'd ever felt before. Gradually, we built a fragile defense system in the heart of our family hell. The more Dad controlled and pressured us, the more careful and clever we became. And deep inside me, for the first time in years, a small flicker of hope was born. Because if we were patient enough, one day, the truth would find its way. Chapter 8, the climax. When the truth demanded to be heard, I once believed that if I just had enough evidence, if I was just brave enough, everything would change. But life is never that simple. As soon as we'd gathered a solid cache of evidence, my father escalated his control to a new level, a psychological game with zero mercy, where even the smallest mistake could cost us every bit of freedom we had left. Everything exploded one Sunday morning when my little sister came down with a high fever, her face swollen, her teeth aching so much she couldn't speak. Mom begged Dad to take her to the hospital. He coldly refused, forcing us all to sit on the floor and perform the nurturing chain ritual using painkillers he'd crushed with his own hands. When my sister screamed in pain, Dad yelled at her, demanding she swallow it at all costs. "This is the ritual of healing, of connection, of love," he shrieked, spit flying, his face red with rage. That was when my brother snapped. He jumped up and shouted, "Enough! You're killing her! You're killing this whole family!" The air seemed to shatter. Dad lunged at him, slapping him hard, then turned to all of us, forcing each person to swear they'd never betray the family. Mom clutched my sister, sobbing, and I stood frozen, my heart pounding from fear but also from anger. That night, I made my decision. It was time to bring everything into the light. I gathered all the evidence audio recordings of Dad's rants, Mom's diary photos of injuries, leftover pills, and sent an urgent email for help to the only three people I still trusted. Ms. Ngan, my manager at McDonald's, and my aunt. I wrote clearly, "If you don't help us now, I'm afraid there won't be a second chance." Only 2 days later, the real storm hit. First, my aunt, whom Dad had always been wary of, showed up at our door with a social worker and a doctor. Dad answered with his usual dignified facade, but this time he couldn't control everything. The social worker demanded to check the health of every family member. My aunt pointed straight at my sister and asked, "Why does she have these injuries? Who did this?" Dad launched into his familiar speech. "Our family follows a therapeutic method protected by law. I have all the paperwork, all the scientific proof." But this time, no one believed him. The doctor insisted on taking my sister for an immediate examination. When Dad tried to stop them, my aunt produced a special search warrant with the local court seal. For a second, Dad's face twisted, but he still tried to smile, still tried to talk his way out with individual freedom arguments. At the same time, my manager at McDonald's had contacted the police and the local press, sending out all the evidence I'd collected. Backed into a corner, my father was forced to hand over every medical record, health file, surveillance camera, even his personal computer to investigators. I had never seen our house so chaotic. For the first time, real light flooded into the dark rooms, all our secrets exposed to the horrified eyes of outsiders. My brother hugged my sister while my mother collapsed to her knees, her hands shaking, but a smile breaking out on her face for the first time in years. In that moment, I understood hell had cracked open if we didn't give up. The truth would always find its way out, but even when the truth comes to light, I know the journey ahead won't be easy. My father is still a lawyer, still full of tricks to try to hold on to his power. But this time, we are no longer afraid. We have spoken, fought back, stood up for each other, and whatever happens next, I know I'll never be the silent victim of that monstrous nurturing chain again. Chapter 9. After the rescue, when wounds are still unhealed. After that horrific day, my family's life changed completely, but not in the way people imagine a happy ending. Instead of happiness, relief, or absolute freedom, the first thing we felt was emptiness. The emptiness of fear that hadn't yet faded, the emptiness between relatives who seemed close but had actually been separated for far too long. My father was taken away for investigation that very night in the glare of red and blue lights and the hushed whispers of neighbors. He kept trying to smile to maintain his dignified facade, but I could see in his eyes the panic and collapse behind the mask. My aunt hugged the three of us, crying as she tried to comfort us. My mother just sat on the doorstep, her face buried in her hands, her whole body trembling, unable to utter a word. In the first days after the rescue, we were moved to my aunt's house. Medical staff came to examine us. My brother's and sister's ulcers, infections, and malnutrition made them shake their heads in disbelief. I was diagnosed with an eating disorder. Just seeing food made my heart race. My hands go cold. Every time someone handed me a spoon, I wanted to run away. None of us dared sit and eat together because the sight of family members brought back vivid memories of the nurturing chain. My aunt tried her best to soothe us. She cooked small meals, setting out separate portions for each person. No one forced to finish. No one had to watch someone else chew or swallow. The feeling was both strange and painful. True freedom was nothing like the sweetness I had once dreamed of. It came with guilt, with an invisible fear, was eating alone. Selfish was not passing food from hand to hand. A betrayal of family is for my father. The legal system, though slow, couldn't be tricked this time. The evidence we and my aunt provided, plus medical reports, photos, audio recordings, and Mom's diaries, all spoke for themselves. He lost custody, was investigated for abuse, psychological violence, falsifying medical documents, and even faced possible prosecution for insurance fraud. My mother was admitted for psychological treatment. She barely spoke to anyone for weeks. Some nights I could hear her crying in the dark, sobbing and gasping for air. The doctor said that for people who've been under psychological control for too long, recovery isn't simple. Sometimes it takes a whole lifetime. As for me, my brother and my sister, we had to relearn everything from scratch. How to eat a normal meal, how to talk to strangers, how to trust ourselves, and believe in real help from others. Every step felt shaky. Every new dish was a test of courage. Sometimes I received messages from Ms. Ngan, from my McDonald's manager, and even from old friends. Everyone said, "You're so brave," and justice has finally been served. But only those who've lived through hell know there are wounds that even after you're rescued from the darkness will always leave scars, silent aching, and understood only by those who've been there. And I know it will take me a long time, maybe a lifetime, to truly believe that a family meal doesn't have to be a chain of nightmares, but could actually be the start of a new life. One where no one has to be afraid of their own family ever again. Perhaps in this world there's no wound more painful than the one inflicted by those you love. When the doors of a home close, no one knows if it hides heaven or hell. After everything I've been through, I've learned one thing. Freedom never comes from silence, and it certainly doesn't come from resignation. No matter how many years it takes, no matter how long the nightmares last, I still believe I did the right thing by speaking up, by daring to tell the truth, by choosing light instead of surrendering to endless darkness. If you're in the same situation I was, remember this: all it takes is one person to believe you, one person willing to listen, and hope will always have a way out. And if you're on the outside looking in, please don't just watch, because indifference can be just as much an accomplice to tragedy as any villain.